Welcome back to The Rock Room and another episode of the Rock Your Divorce podcast, where we help men successfully navigate the divorce process in a healthy way. I'm your host, Stephen Valente. If you're like me, you're asking yourself, how do I go about finding the best attorney for me? Or if you have an attorney, you may be saying to yourself, I don't understand this law, and my divorce lawyer isn't that good at explaining it to me. You may be wondering, what can I do to help make sure that I'm treated fairly in this divorce? And lastly, you may be asking yourself, how long is this process going to take and how much is it going to cost me? Well, if that sounds like you, then you are absolutely in the right place. Because in today's episode, we're going to talk about not only finding the best attorney for you, but leveraging the legal process to your advantage both during and after the divorce. If that sounds like something you're interested in, then plug in, turn it up, and let's hit the stage. As we discuss on this podcast, there are 7 key areas of your life that if you focus on them each and every day, you will absolutely be able to not only navigate this divorce process in a healthy way, but you will absolutely thrive after the process is done. And the visual that I normally share is that of a 7-channel mixing board, right? And each of those channels represents one of the key areas of your life. And the faders themselves are kind of the time and effort and energy that you find yourself putting into each of those 7 key areas, whether it's daily or weekly, right? And as we've discussed in the past, it's really impossible, especially during the divorce process, to be able to equally balance everything in your life while this divorce process is done. However, if you just take a couple key components from each of those 7 key areas, you will absolutely not only navigate this divorce process in a healthy way, but you will thrive afterward. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about fader number 7, which happens to be the legal aspect of your life, the legal portion of divorce, and something that I call own the process. Now, as I said in some other episodes and kind of how we got to this point with Rock Your Divorce, when I went looking for resources for myself right before I filed for divorce, there were really only 2 areas that came up, whether it was Google searches, whether it was researching divorce and men and all of this, and that was the financial and it was the legal. And of course, as I've said in the past, both of those are extremely important in this divorce process and after it's done, but they're not the only 2. And that's what kind of sparked the 7 key areas of life. However, I do want to focus a little bit today on the 7th, legal, because it is such an important part of this process. Now, I placed it last because you may not be dealing with legal issues each and every day during your divorce process. In fact, one of the frustrations that I have, and we're going to talk about here in a minute, is that the process takes a long, long time sometimes. I mean, you may not hear anything for days or weeks in between. So the fader itself, although that key area of your life is important, it's not nearly as important each and every day that the other 6 are. Okay, so that's why it sits in the 7th. But today we're going to talk about fader number 7. We're going to talk about the legal process, the legal aspect of your life, and I call it own the process. So let's talk about some of the mistakes that men make, especially during the divorce process or prior to the divorce process, and kind of how we can talk through some of those and overcome some of those along the way. And in my personal experience and in some of those experiences with men that I've coached or am coaching right now, the number one thing that we do wrong is we pick the wrong attorney. And, there's that kind of joke that, what do you call an attorney, the one that graduated last in their their college class or, made the last score on their test. And that's an attorney, right? Like they are still an attorney. And so there are good attorneys, there are bad attorneys. There's great doctors, there's bad doctors. There's great auto mechanics and great plumbers, and not so good auto mechanics and not so good plumbers. So just because they have a law practice doesn't mean that they're a good attorney for divorce. And just because they do divorces or they can represent men in divorce, it doesn't mean that that attorney is right for you. Okay. So, along the process, it's really about picking the right attorney that works for you. Don't look for the cheapest. Don't look for the one that's closest to your house, or that, maybe your buddy used, right? Because there's a lot of other things that go into picking the right attorney. For me, it was personality. For me, it was understanding, how do we work together, right? How do we communicate? How does, my attorney was male. How does he communicate? Does he have experience with divorce? If so, I did it almost like an interview process, because it's ultra important that you pick someone that you work well with and that you trust, right? So yes, do your research. Yes, get opinions from others that may have gone through the experience before you, but ultimately you have to choose the best one that works with you and the best personality type that goes along with you, because it is a very difficult and long and draining process. And you need to make sure that you find the right, in this case, teammate to work with you. The second mistake that I know that I made very early on, however, I course corrected very quickly, and I know that other men make this, is that they assume that their attorney is educated on the divorce process, and that, they've seen everything before and they've done it before, and this is going to be, a no-brainer for them. What I will tell you is that, especially if you're a man who maybe owns a business, maybe it's high affluency, right? Or if you are in a high conflict divorce, whether it's because of financial or children in child custody, or potentially the reason that you're getting divorced, or maybe your soon-to-be former spouse or former spouse has some mental issues or whatever it is, right? There's a lot of different things that you need to take into consideration, and you can't assume that your attorney understands that. You can't assume that your attorney understands how to work with that. So that's why the interview process is very important. It doesn't cost you anything to go meet with other attorneys prior to picking an attorney to go with. And I truly encourage you to do your due diligence, because ultimately this is the person that's going to help you throughout this process, and hopefully help you get the fairest and most equitable outcome that you can under the law. So that's picking the attorney. One of the things that I know that I did very early on, and I again learned quickly, but I'm trying to coach and I'll help you navigate this process for you too, is that you cannot give total control to the attorney everything that goes on with this divorce. It reminds me a lot of, that when I used to work with physicians, where, you talk to a physician, or you assume as a patient that physician knows everything about what you're going through, right? And the wonderful thing about physicians is that they're supposed to know a lot about a lot of things, right? But they're still learning too. And attorneys are the same way. So, you can't just turn your life over to an attorney and assume that they're going to be able to, understand and appreciate and have the same sense of urgency that you have about your divorce and your family, because they don't, right? I mean, this is their business. They're dealing with a lot of clients all at once. They are not, I don't want to say they're not interested in your life, but they can only be interested to a certain extent, right? They have time constraints because they may be dealing with many other cases at the same time. They do not know the details of what's going on in your life or what's happening during your divorce or all the things that led up to your divorce or all the things that are going on during the process. And even if they take really, really good notes, they're still trying to juggle all of these different, balls in the air. They're spinning all of these plates each and every day. That is just the nature of what it means to be an attorney. And that's not a knock on them. It's just kind of how their industry operates. So what I encourage you to do is, kind of in that whole idea of owning the process, you have to be the one to step up and make the decision to, whether it's, taking notes, whether it's meetings, whether it's reminding them of certain things, you have to own your divorce. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the details about it a little bit later on, but you need to do that. One of the things that I know that going into my divorce, I was not necessarily educated on the divorce itself, divorce law, the process of divorce, what was going to happen during my divorce, what all the documents meant, and what are all these hearings. I didn't know any of that, and I think that's a good thing on one aspect, because I never expected to have to be there in my life. But at the same time, too, I learned very quickly that if I didn't get educated about the process and educated about, what is going on, what can I expect, what do these documents mean, or whatever it is, my attorney wasn't just going to volunteer that information to me. So you have to almost be a student of your divorce process during the process, asking questions, understanding, okay, what is going on? What are the timelines? What does this mean? Does this impact? Does it have a big impact or a small impact? Does it impact it at all? There's so many things. And as I said before, we're going to go through each of these individually, and I'm going to have subsequent episodes, very detailed episodes about the legal process, legal documents, mediations, court. I mean, all of that is coming. But I just kind of wanted to give you this flavor of things that you need to initially think about, not only because you may be looking right now for attorneys and understanding the process, or you are very early on or somewhere within this divorce process, and you may be feeling like, I don't really understand what's going on. My attorney's not really telling me. He's not getting back to me on time. There's all these different feelings that you're feeling. So I've felt them, and I'm sharing them with you on that end. So one of the things that I think also needs to be addressed is that marriage is a business. And I've done an episode on this already, and it was the most difficult thing for me, I think, to wrap my head around and to come to grips with once this process started, is that once the marriage is over and those divorce papers are filed and the process begins, in essence, the marriage is done, right? You're just going through this legal process to end the business side of marriage. And that was extremely difficult for me to wrap my head around. I struggled with that, from a biblical standpoint, from an emotional standpoint. And it didn't take me long. In fact, it was probably within the first week or two to understand that things were going to be very business driven from then on, right? And you have to put yourself in that mindset. You have to put yourself in the mindset that, unfortunately, there's a business side of marriage. And what ends up happening is that if you don't look at it that way, if you don't change the emotional side that goes along with divorce, you can get yourself into many, many different legal situations that are unhealthy for you. They could be damaging for you. They could be very expensive for you, just because you're letting your emotions now drive your decision making with your attorney or with this divorce process. So, I encourage you, kind of going back to the third fader, which is emotion, and your emotional side of your life, really getting those emotions in check, understanding that, ultimately both sides are looking at this as a business transaction now, and that you have to negotiate what's best for you during this legal process so that you can be the best man and father to your children that you can be, that your children are taken care of, but that you're also not taken advantage of from a financial aspect or from a time aspect, or whatever the part that you're negotiating circles around. So those are the things that I think from a mistakes perspective. I made some of those. Some of the guys that I coach or I'm coaching right now are either have made some of those and we've course corrected, or if I'm talking to them very early in the process, I'll go through some of this stuff with them, during a coaching session, just to make sure that they understand that ultimately they own the process. Because what I have found in talking to men, doing research, and just kind of getting brought up to speed on where men's heads are in this process, the mindsets are all over the board when it comes to the divorce. So let me explain that to you. Kind of on one side of the spectrum, you have men that are indifferent, right? They don't care. They'll say, I don't care. Whatever I need to do to get it done, right? They hire an attorney. They turn it over to the attorney. They do the bare minimum of what they have to do. And basically, they're just there. They're along for the ride. However it ends up, it ends up. Now, I'm not saying that that's not necessarily good for that specific case. It might be someone who wasn't married long. They don't have a lot of marital assets together. They may not have any children together. So the business transaction of it is fairly benign when that divorce, that process is going on or is done. But by and large, if you've been married for any amount of time, and especially if you have children, you cannot be indifferent about what goes on with the divorce. You cannot turn it over to your attorney and wipe your hands of it and tell me, hey, wake me up when I have to sign the paperwork. As a man, period, as a man, you deserve better than that for yourself, and you absolutely need to treat this much different for your children and for your future. So that's the indifferent side of it. As you kind of work in, you have those men that are a little nonchalant about it. They care, but they're not necessarily worried. They're kind of, well, whatever happens. I trust and I have faith that everything's going to be fine. And whether it's the nonchalant men or the naive men who think, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be 50-50. My former spouse isn't going to put up a fight. We're not going to fight about it. We're going to equally split everything and all that. I hope that that's the case. I hope that you are in a situation right there in the middle where you can have an amicable split. You can, for the betterment of the kids and for the betterment of both of you coming out of this divorce, that is the case. In my research and in my experience and in my coaching, that is such a rarity and such an anomaly that I don't believe many of you are in that position. And quite frankly, if you are in that position, I could almost guarantee there's no need for you to really be watching this, because things are just going to work out for you. You've already got things taken care of. You don't have a lot of turmoil in your life, and everything's great. I believe you're a small portion of that. And then as you move on, it's really kind of the overwhelmed feel where, you're all encompassed, everything that's going on in your life. You're trying to be involved in the process, and you're trying to understand it, and you're trying to get ahead of the curve, make sure that there's no surprises. You're doing your research, you're being involved, and you have that individual. Then on the most far on this side is the rage. And this is, I'm going to caution those of you that are out there that want to start at a place of rage, okay? And like I said, just a few minutes ago, you absolutely need to learn to control your emotions and remove the emotions from this process. Because if you don't, you are absolutely not only going to get yourself into a lot of trouble, whether it's with your soon-to-be former spouse or your former spouse, whether it's with your children, whether it's with your employer, friends, and family. You have to be able to control that. And let's just be honest, as a man, you have to control your emotions. So you cannot let them, spark you to do things. I have seen and have been a part of, different scenarios where they know that some guy is a hothead, and during whether it's depositions or testimony or in front of judges, they'll take advantage of that. They'll exploit his emotions, and it never works out for you. It never works out for you. So I'm hoping that you don't start from a place of rage. The best thing for you to do is really make sure that you're more toward the center, and more engaged from an indifference perspective, from a more level-headed perspective. And that's where really utilizing these other 6 key areas of your life, right? The ones that you can learn, some key components on, put those into practice while you're going through the divorce, that helps you remove that emotion, remove that rage, and really focus more on positivity and gratitude, and really striving and thriving to become that man that you want to be and that God has intended you to be, and not this man full of rage and animosity and all the negativity that can come along with the divorce process. Okay. So you're probably asking yourself, what are those 4 things that I can do to ensure that I'm successful not only during this divorce process, but so that I can succeed and thrive afterwards? Here we go. As a reminder, I'm going to be doing subsequent episodes on each of these 4 key components of the legal process. I believe that by taking the time and spending it on each of those individually, I can provide you more information, more insight, and some more tips and tricks to ensure that you are extremely successful in navigating the legal aspect of this process. But those are coming in future episodes. So let's cover the top 4. The first one is you must lead the process. Now, again, you need to be able to find the right attorney, and you need to find the right attorney that not only works with your personality, but also has that experience that you're looking for your specific case. The other thing that you need to make sure is that attorney fits in your budget. So again, number 1 thing you can do is lead the process. Number 2, you have to become comfortable with the process. You have to get educated on what it means to go through divorce. There's going to be terms, there's going to be processes, there's going to be steps that you're going to have to learn. So you need to take ownership and be the expert on your case with your attorney all throughout the divorce process. And that's going to take work and that's going to take time, but I promise you it's going to be worth it. The third thing that you need to do is you need to control the narrative that comes from your attorney. And I'm not just talking about being proactively involved in the communication between the attorney and your former spouse's attorney or your attorney and the court. I think this has a lot to do with strategy. It's what's best for you. It's what's best for your children and your family specifically. So own the process and control that narrative to where what is happening throughout the process benefits you and benefits your kids and benefits your future. The last thing that you need to do, and this may not be for everybody, but it's for those that are having to deal with it, you're going to understand what I'm saying, is document, document, document. I was told very early on in this process, the facts don't lie, but people do. So you need to make sure that you are keeping evidence, you are taking notes, you are doing all of those things that you need to do to not only protect you from false claims, but you need to be able to build an evidence and a case on what you are trying to accomplish during the divorce process. So again, lead the process. You need to be comfortable with the process. You need to control the narrative, and you need to document, document, document. So, if anything that I've said today resonates with you or strikes a chord with you and you want to learn more, head on over to www.rockyourdivorce.com, schedule a free 30-minute phone call with me because I know that I can help you not only navigate this divorce process in a healthy way, but set yourself up to thrive when this process is done. While you're there, I ask that you like and subscribe to the Rock Your Divorce podcast and share it. Or if you know men that are either currently going through the divorce process or they've already been through the divorce process, but they just have not been able to thrive afterwards, I ask that you send them here to the Rock Room and to the Rock Your Divorce podcast. That's it for today's episode. I look forward to seeing you next time on Rock Your Divorce podcast.